All right, Nick, let's talk about the Houston Texans. Big moves going down in Houston. As everybody knows, big trade for the Texans. I think it's going to really help them out here. And again, second year in a row, they're trying to up CJ Stroud's arsenal. I think this will be a big one for the Texans going forward. But before we break that down, I'm Andrew. That's Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, as I alluded to, big trade for the Texans getting on the books. I think this is a good one. Christian Kirk, for the Texans. I think it's going to be a smart trade. Let's jump into the article and we can talk more about it on the other side. This is from over on CBS Sports. It says, for the second consecutive offseason, the Houston Texans will be bringing in a new weapon for quarterback CJ Stroud. The Texans are finalizing a trade for Jacksonville Jaguar receiver Christian Kirk. According to CBS Sports insider Jonathan Jones, it was reported earlier in the week that Kirk would be released by the Jaguars, cap casualty, but the Texans are instead sending a 2026 7th-round pick to Jacksonville in exchange for his services. I think it's a smart trade by the Texans, able to get their guy and not let him hit the open market. Really good move by them. Curious what your thoughts are on this one, Nick, but before we get to you, Texans fans, in the comment section below, let us know, what are your thoughts on this latest trade? Do you give it an A? Are you excited? Is Christian Kirk the guy that you thought that they should go get? Is it a C? Do you think, okay, I think he was good, maybe some up and down years. I'm not too sure about it. We're going to see it plays out. Or is it an F? Did you hate it? Kind of doubt it. Anytime you get a weapon on the offense, it's always pretty exciting. But let us know in the comment section below your thoughts on this trade. But nonetheless, Nick, what are your thoughts on this latest move by the Texans?
So my first impression when you hear a trade like this go down and you see Christian Kirk for a 7th-round pick, and Kirk is far from a superstar, but he's a good receiver and has been a good wide receiver in tough environments in Arizona and in Jacksonville, far from the top cultures, far from the top organizations in the National Football League. And the fact that you got him for a future 7th-round pick, not this year, but next year, 2026, at first glance, that's a steal. And I will say this, when it comes to grading trades, sometimes your initial gut reaction is really the right one, because sometimes you can get in the weeds and kind of doubt yourself a little bit, doing some really diving into numbers and metrics. But the reality is, what's your gut feeling? And this seemed like a big win for the Texans. Now, that being said, let's dive into the numbers a little bit. Let's pull up this tweet from Spot Track, if you don't mind, Mize, breaking down the trade. So the Texans will acquire Christian Kirk. They will take $16.5 million of a cap hit. The Jaguars will acquire a 2026 7th-round pick on their end. And of course, as it's noted right there, which I think is very interesting, that's non-guaranteed dollars. So Christian Kirk over the past couple of years has been dealing with some health issues. So that's if those health issues persist and it looks like he won't be a regular player for the Houston Texans, or he has some issues to start the season, they could cut him at minimal loss, right, in terms of salary cap dollars. So there is that option there for the Texans, kind of a schmuck insurance, if you will. If things go bad, they can cut him with minimal or no, depending on when they release him, cap damage to their short, medium, and long-term prospects. Now, we just look at this at face value, though, a 7th-round pick. I am trying to remember the last time a 7th-round pick had Christian Kirk's numbers. If we just look at last season, which was Kirk's worst year by far on a terrible Jacksonville team, all kinds of issues at quarterback, dumpster fire situation with the head coach, organization falling apart, right? Just absolute terrible. He caught 27 passes in 8 games, right? Averaged out over the course of a season, that's about 50 to 60 catches. I don't know if there's a 7th-round pick you can get in any draft where you can expect anywhere remotely close to that level of production. So obviously the Texans are getting much more in return for Cook in terms of production they're going to get now versus anyone they could ever find in the 7th round, whether it's this year, next year, any 7th-round pick from now into perpetuity, right? Now, maybe get lucky and find a steal, but there's no way on a consistent average basis you're going to get a 7th-round wide receiver with those kind of numbers. So just take all that in mind, right? You just look at those high level things and you're like, this was a massive win for the Houston Texans. Obviously, we got a new OC coming in. We got trying to rebound CJ Stroud, trying to get this team deeper into the postseason, right? They've had a couple runs to it, winning the division title. They just need to find a way to go deeper. I know there's a lot of issues on the offensive line they certainly have to address, but this is just really solid move right here. Again, a 7th-round pick for a veteran wide receiver, slot guy to give CJ Stroud another weapon, a different kind of weapon. He hasn't had a guy quite like Christian Kirk yet. I love this approach by the Houston Texans, and I think this is a really smart trade. Masterclass move here by Houston.
Yeah, Nick, and I love the aspect here that, Kirk set to hit the open market and people would probably bid on him, jack his price up. The Texans had to battle for him. But like you said, they send a next year 2026 seventh round pick, be able to secure that player and work on the deal themselves, try to extend them if they want to do that as well. I think that was a really, really great deal there because even if it doesn't work out, it's just a seventh round pick for next year. Future picks are always less valuable than the picks that you have coming this year. So it's even less than a seventh round pick if you want to think of it in that regard. But I really think Kirk is going to shine on the Texans. I know last season with the Jags, they did bring in the young rookie receiver who did pretty well. But outside of that, Kirk has always been kind of like the number one in Jacksonville. He's one of the top receivers they had. And I don't think that's the role he shines in. I think this role that they're going to bring him in this Texans offense where Nico Collins, he has been fantastic the last 2 years, 90 plus PFF grades the last 2 years. And I think John Mechie brings a lot to the table, as well as Schultz at the tight end position is a good receiving threat. I think Kirk is going to blossom in this Texans offense. And I think CJ Stroud, on the other hand, he's really good. I think Trevor Lawrence has been good in the past, but in the last few years, I don't think he's performing at the level that CJ Stroud has been at. I really think Christian Kirk is a valuable addition to this offense, and I'm really thinking we're starting to see things change for the Houston Texans. Because you bring in Diggs, it was a move that I think kind of, everybody got hyped up for, but when you think about Diggs, he comes with baggage. There's always been a lot of problems with a guy like Stephon Diggs, and he never really pans out, never is really the guy that you absolutely want him to be. On the other hand, though, when a guy like Christian Kirk, I think he probably always overperforms what people think about him. You think back to 2 years ago, he had back-to-back 1,000-plus-yard receiving seasons, doing some really good stuff in that regard. But so I think this is going to be a really under-the-radar move. I think it's going to be a valuable position. What he's getting paid $15 million, something along those lines, where it's DK Metcalf's getting traded now, and it's reported that he wants $30 million plus.
Yeah.
It's a value nowadays. When the Jags initially signed Christian Kirk, I think people thought, they probably overpaid for him a little bit. That was a little bit high price. But nowadays, getting him at that price, I think it's a bargain. I think this was a really solid move by the Texans.
Yeah, especially when you look at the roster too. And I think that's always important to understand. You have to figure out what position are you in. And the Houston Texans, like it or not, they're in win now mode. They're in an opportunity to win a title now. They've got some obviously holes on the roster, but they've got a great young quarterback. They got a lot of talented young pieces and veteran pieces as well. We think a really good head coach, D'Amico Ryans. Hopefully there's an upgrade at the OC coming after the hiring this offseason. But the reality is they're in win now mode. They need to go out and be aggressive. And if you look at the receiving leaders from last season, just pulling up the numbers here, it gets really bad really quickly. And I know injuries are a problem, right? But I'm just even going to look back some of these injuries. There's a number of guys that were brought in to be like the middle of the field operator, the slot receiver. Diggs was brought in to be the X or the Z, right? The wide guy. Of course, we know Nico Collins can do that role. He's one of the best in the football. He's a star wide receiver. And Tank Dell, he's an explosive playmaking guy down the field. But how about a slot guy to move the chains and just threaten defense between the hashes? That's what the Texans really, really needed, to be totally honest with you. They've got Dalton Schultz, but I'm going to be totally honest. Dalton Schultz has been a horrific blocker and a little bit underwhelming as a receiver. Now they need to try and focus on the wide receiver position. Hopefully they can find a guy that operated the slot. They tried that, right? They had Woods, didn't work last season. Mechie, great story, big fan of his. He was awesome in college. Nothing against the kid. The reality is he's just not getting it done in the slot consistently enough. They need a veteran, right? They can't go out and draft a guy in the second or third round to try and be a slot receiver. They're in win now mode, right? Go after a veteran. They brought in a veteran in Christian Kirk. And here's one of my favorite things I like about this guy, Christian Kirk, is he is productive in terrible organizations. The guys that find a way to do that usually go on to great things because when they're in a better environment, better quarterback player, better coach, magically their numbers explode. I think one of the great examples of this in NFL history, you look at guys like Wes Welker and Randy Moss prior to them going to the Patriots in 2007. Welker's career was kind of really nothing, more of a returner. Randy Moss's career was considered almost over. He was with the Raiders, and then they go to the Patriots, and suddenly they have incredible seasons. And now Randy Moss, of course, is a Hall of Famer or is well on his way. And Wes Welker has a lot of course, merit to becoming a Hall of Famer in his own right with the number of productive seasons he had with the Patriots and the Denver Broncos. So we're looking at a situation here where Christian Kirk, good numbers, productive, good player on bad organizations. Now he's coming to a good organization, a winning organization with good, consistent quarterback play. I think CJ Stroud's better than Trevor Lawrence at this point. I think that's inarguable. I expect Christian Kirk to be really productive and just a really good player for the Houston Texans in that key slot receiver role. Because Miles, I'll ask you this question to kind of get your thought on this. outside of offensive line, I think this is the biggest area of need, a third down machine for CJ Stroud. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think definitely this has got to be, outside of the specifically the right side of the offensive line. They really need to bolster that side. The left looking pretty decent, the right not so much. But you look around this team, they've got great options at corner. Stingley Jr. is an absolute animal. He's been a beast for the last 2 years. Lasseter did a really great job last year as well. And in fact, Jamie Ward doing a great job at safety. Defense now with Anderson and Hunter on the edge, you're dangerous there. I think just looking around, you got to think wide receiver. It's got to be the place where you got to upgrade. Like you said, I think they've got some really talented guys on here, but there's a lot of guys that just get hurt too often, and it just really has kind of hindered them. So getting depth, getting more talented guys in this wide receiver room was really a big need. Christian Kirk, bringing him into the fold, think he's a really talented receiver. They get him at a bargain price here. I think it was a really solid move by the Texans to do that. And I really think that this is, like you said, they're in win now mode. This is one of those moves I think puts them in contention for the playoffs this coming season. I think they're going to be dangerous. And I think barring any injuries, this team is going to be looking fierce, especially if they can upgrade the right side of that offensive line.
And just one final point to end on here, talking about third down percentage. I knew Houston was rough in that department in 2024. I didn't know how bad. So Houston finished 20th. The Indianapolis Colts, with their issues on quarterback and offense, and the Tennessee Titans, with Will Levis behind center, finished ahead of the Houston Texans in terms of third down conversion rate. That is absolutely staggering. Now, you want to blame some of that on Bobby Slowick? Fine. Some of that on O-line issues? Fine. I think a lot of that is CJ Stroud having to hold the ball too long, trying to find a receiver to get open instead of a quick wide slot receiver. Minchie couldn't get it done. Woods wasn't getting it done. I tell you what, Christian Kirk can get it done. He got it done with the Jacksonville Jaguars for a number of years, got it done with the Arizona Cardinals especially. He will come in and have a big impact on this offense. It may not be 100 catches, it may just be 50, but you'll see 30 or 4 more third down conversions over the course of a season, 2 or 3 per game. And that's the difference between winning 10 and winning 12, getting a couple home games or just getting one home game perhaps, and that can be all that matters between one and done or making a run to the title. I love this move. Smart trade by the Texans.